I want you to put the word out there that we back up. Understand me? We back up.
Thanks, String. Roll the music.
Orange and blue running through our veins, rooting for the Mets through incidents and pains. It's a Mets podcast hosted by Michael Bayside. His views and ideas are fortified. Mets news, saves, injuries, and wins. We can't wait for the next game to begin. This is the theme song to Mike's Mets podcast. This is the theme song to Mike's Mets podcast. Orange and blue running through our veins.
Welcome to Mike's Mets Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota, and it's opening day eve. We are enjoying a very nice Wednesday night. We have gotten the news about the Mets opening day roster. We can finally make our projections and our predictions for the 2025 season. First, just want to say I know it's been a long time since I recorded. For people who subscribe and follow the channel, greatly appreciate you. Sorry for the long absence. It was a period where I was trying to sort of take in everything that was going on with the Mets, look at the spring training games, which were a lot of fun, and enjoying everything that I saw with the on-field products, and just paying attention to all the different various storylines that were happening. So I was trying to put my full attention on that. The lack of recording was due to just various like personal work issues that were getting in the way of me recording, and then finally I was like, it was coming into this week. I was looking at either Sunday night or Monday night of doing a podcast after the end of spring training, but I wanted to wait until we actually got the word as to what was going to be happening with the spring training roster. We finally got the news, which was announced by the Mets today, that they will break camp with Brett Beatty, Hayden Sanger, catcher, and right-handed pitchers Max Krennick and Huascar Brazaban on the roster. So they announced that those players will make the team. Congratulations to everybody, particularly Brett Beatty, who had a wonderful spring training. Really just knocked the cover off the ball all spring training. Looked very comfortable at second base. He comes into this position after the Jeff McNeil injury, which was certainly a blow, not just to McNeil, but also to Met fans and the team itself. After it looked like he had it looked like it was maybe a bounce back year potentially for McNeil if he'd stayed healthy. He's going to start the year on the IL. There's not really any word as to when he will be back. They're being a little bit vague about it. The timing was sort of that, well, he'll be back at some point. They're not really sure when, but it looks like I would guess probably sometime in late April based on what they've been saying, and the nature of his injury, and they want to give him certainly time to ramp up with spring training since he missed most of it. So, yeah, a blow, but it has opened a door for Brett Beatty, who, again, really played well on both sides. So just offensively, defensively, looked very comfortable. That is kind of the thing. I think Beatty really just needs confidence at this point to sort of establish where he wants to go and do. He is not a guy that really projects as a second baseman technically. He's, I think, a little bit too big for the second base position, especially when you factor in stuff like turning double plays with Francisco Lindor. We didn't see a ton of that during spring training, but the more reps that they get together will probably help Beatty get more comfortable at second base. He has the athleticism. For as big as he is, he does get a lot of range, and he does cover a lot of ground playing that position, and I guess his length does help him in that regard, but it's pretty much anybody's guess if he could actually man that position for a full season. And for what it's worth, it's pretty apparent to everybody that Jeff McNeil will probably have a job still when he gets back, whenever that happens. They expect him to go back slot into that lineup, but it's up to Beatty at this point to sort of make it hard for McNeil to re-establish himself and take that position back, take that starting spot back. I certainly wish the best for Brett Beatty. He has not had what could be regarded as a very successful tenure with the Mets. He didn't see a lot of time in 2023 with the team. Buck Showalter emphasized more veteran play over Beatty getting more reps at third base. That probably impacted him. 2024, he didn't really look very comfortable at the plate. It necessitated a call down to AAA once more, and they're hoping that this is it for him, like that he has reached a level of confidence and ability at the plate and in the fields that he can be a guy who they can either count on to start or count on to at least be a capable reserve infielder. And his ability to play multiple positions, third, second, probably even first base if they really needed him to, is part of why he got the job. The other part of is when you hit that well in spring training, it's really hard for you not to get a job. Of course, there are guys like Alexander Canario, who also hit really well. Unfortunately, is limited by the Mets are limited in terms of wanting to keep the guy around. They have to find a roster spot for him, and unfortunately, things just worked out the way it did. That Canario is probably getting designated for assignment, and he's going to have to go through waivers. He's not going to make it through waivers if the Mets want to keep him. It would be shocking if the Mets were actually able to get him through waivers because everybody saw him play in spring training. He projects as a really talented power-hitting outfielder, corner outfielder spot, and the Mets' acquisition of him was probably dependent on them trading Starling Marte. The Mets couldn't find a willing trade partner to get Marte off their roster, and so they're going to break camp with Marte still on the team, and that's not a terrible thing. I like Marte a lot, and I still think Marte has good baseball left in him, particularly if he's DHing. This is a good chance for him to stay hopefully more healthy if he's not playing every day in the outfield, but it's a blow for somebody like Canario, who looks like a really young, talented player, and a guy who's hit at pretty much every level that he's played at and hit well. Has a lot of power, obviously, decent walk rate, strikes out a lot. That is the counter argument to having a guy like Canario around, but super talented. It's such a shame that they probably aren't going to be able to keep him. I'm saying this now on Wednesday. We don't know for sure if that's going to be the case, but it would seem in all likelihood that Alexander Canario won't be sticking around with the Mets for much longer. To blow. Moving past that, we talk about the feel-good story, which is Hayden Senger. So Hayden Senger, catcher, it's a very interesting story, which is basically that he has been bouncing around in the Mets organization for close to, I believe it was, so they drafted him originally. This was, a very long time ago. They drafted him originally in what is no longer the case, the 24th round, which doesn't actually, they don't have the 24th round anymore, of 2018 in the draft. So they drafted him in 2018, and he's just kind of like bounced around the Mets farm system for 8 years. So he played 2024 with the team. He's basically been the same level of play for pretty much his entire time with the Mets, which has been decent, good enough that he couldn't get fired, basically, was the problem. The Mets organization never had a ton of catching depth, so he always had a job. But he is a guy who never really projected as particularly great. So it's fascinating that he gets the job, and of course he's only really getting the job because the Mets are in a bit of a pickle right now, which is they have Francisco Alvarez on the IL with the broken or fractured hamate bone, and that's an issue that's going to be lingering for a while. They expect him. It was 4 to 6 weeks in early March, so that puts his projected return date as around sometime in late April. I might even go as far as like early May, because he didn't really get a chance to really play that much in spring training. They wanted him to ramp up. There's going to be some time in spring in AAA. things might happen. Who knows? It's such a problem. I know, honestly, for Francisco Alvarez, who I love dearly, but this guy has a lot of trouble staying healthy. He's still very young. I think there's a lot of there's chances that Alvarez still has a lot of impressive career left in him, but it's another injury this early in his career, and it's another hand injury. I'm like, this guy has armor up your hands. That's all I can really help for him. But going back to Hayden Singer, I mean, so this was the astonishing thing with his story. So this was reported. So it was 7 years after the Mets selected him. 4 years after he finally reached like the upper minors, so AAA, AA, and actually had to take an off-season job at Whole Foods in order to kind of stay afloat. Again, minor league players are paid well, but not great. And for a guy who's been around for as long as he has, it was required. It was basically necessary for him to take a secondary job at a grocery food retailer is pretty stunning. This isn't like 1985 anymore. You usually don't see professional ball players still taking jobs elsewhere. But he was the definition of a journeyman of player who just couldn't really get a job. Was always considered an elite defensive player, and that was kind of his calling card, which was why he was able to keep his job. But another reason why was that they looked at him as this incredible defensive catcher, a guy who David Stearns has said that pitchers love throwing to. It's something that does carry weight, and particularly for a guy like Stearns, who is very particular about finding guys who fit a niche, and it's not always something that's on the box score with those guys. He tends to look for those guys and find something that there's value there. It's an amazing story. It's really crazy that he had this amazing run, and I'm glad for him. I don't know how long he'll be around for. Probably not much more than a month, but in having him up there, at least as a good defensive catcher, and whatever offense they can get out of him, they'll be happy with it. But it leaves the starting duties to fall to Luis Torrens. And Torrens, another guy I really like. He was a really good backup last year, and I thought the Mets really got lucky in terms of acquiring him. That they acquired this guy who was really, really solid. Both at the plate as a hitter, but also behind the plate as a catcher, pitch caller, and it's a really good job that the Mets have done in terms of acquiring talent that kind of flies under the radar. I didn't think Torrens was a guy that projected as a particularly great player, but the Mets saw something in him. Again, this is another David Stearns. Find the guy that looks like he could give you something, give you some value. And Torrens has been, I think, just a really good addition to the team. Great backup. Starter, he'll probably be batting 8th or 9th this year. So when Alvarez gets back, we hope very soon, having him back in the lineup will hopefully make that what is still a really good unit even better. Having Alvarez in there is that guy who kind of is in that 5 or 6 hole in that lineup. Backing up what is a truly great on paper 1 through 4 with Lindor, Soto, Alonso, and Vientos. Having him in there as the kind of bridge to the bottom part of the lineup is going to be really great. So the projected lineup right now looks like it's going to be Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Vientos. That's your 1 through 4. Arguably the best 1 through 4 in baseball. I mean, I'm sure the Dodgers probably have a case to be made. Same for a team like the Phillies, the Atlanta Braves. But it's with Lindor and Soto, that is the best 1-2 combo. I defy you to find a better group that's better than Lindor and Soto. That's truly an elite lead off man second hitter combo. So it's pretty fantastic. I'm really excited to see that. Batting 5th, likely Brandon Nimmo, and then after that we have an amalgamation of some combination of Jose Siri, Brett Beatty, Luis Torrens, and whoever's DHing, which will be some combination of Starling Marte and Jesse Winker. And so those last 4 spots are not great. Certainly, Siri has talent. We've seen that in his spring training. That this kid has a lot of power. It's a matter of him not just striking out every time that he steps up. Great defensive player. I'm interested to see what Siri can do for the team, and he might be another finding a diamond in the rough sort of situation where you acquire a guy who is clearly like a great glove, but they might have found a guy who also can provide some value with his bat, even if it's not something with his batting average, but really more of a guy who can hit for like 20, 25 home runs, and hitting with that kind of power in the bottom of the order. It does have a significant amount of value. Going back into the Mets who made the team, then you have Max Kranick, a guy who's still very young. Of course, converted to a full-time reliever a couple of years ago, and then he had a terrific spring. So it was only allowed 2 runs across 12 and third innings this spring. Had a 15-1 strikeout to walk ratio. He's only 27. He's looked very effective. His ability to go multiple innings in combination with a guy like Jose Budo, those two should be real helpful additions to the Mets bullpen. Not an addition for Budo, but for Kranick especially. Like having another guy like Budo in that bullpen, building a bridge over to AJ Minter, who also made the team, and that wasn't really a surprise, but there was questions about whether Minter would be ready to go by opening day, but he is indeed ready to go, so we can expect Minter in the 8th inning role, and then, of course, Edwin Diaz in the 9th hole. We won't see Daniel Nunez, which is, it sucks. I'm a big Nunez fan. He looks like a legit guy. It's just a matter of this guy can stay healthy, which feels like a lot of a common refrain with a lot of these guys who the Mets have. It's just if they can stay healthy, they look really good. And you could say the same for the entire Mets starting rotation right now, which is just it's looking more and more like an elfin graveyard. That's maybe a little bit harsh on my part. There is talent there. There is value, and I'm not going to like poke the bear or poke a stick at David Stearns and say, how come he didn't do this? How come he didn't do that? I was, obviously very much in favor of them making a trade, and they might still make a trade, but of making a trade for one of the Padres pitchers like Michael King or David Cease. It remains to be seen what they end up doing with that whole situation. But the starting rotation, as of right now, the opening series starting rotation. Oh boy! So it's it will be Clay Holmes starting opening day. Something I did not expect. I don't think anyone saw that coming. But in lieu of better options and with them trying to keep Kodai Senga, whose availability was somewhat limited during spring training, they want to hold him until the Miami series. They're going to start in Houston with Clay Holmes. It should be interesting. This whole experiment with Holmes, who's looked terrific. I gotta say, like, has looked absolutely great. He looks like a truly dominant starting pitcher potentially. And if the Mets are hoping that he's Michael King, great. A little bit older than Michael King, but it's certainly a risk. There's a lot of ways this could go badly, and puts a lot of pressure on Holmes to be a quote unquote ace to start the year off, while they're waiting for Sean Manaea to get healthy and Frankie Montas to get healthy and Kodai Senga to look like 2023 Kodai Senga. So we're waiting to see what goes on with that. Incredibly, David Peterson will not be available for the opening series against the Astros. So Peterson will start Game 4 in Miami, with Senga going Game 5. Instead, we will get. Oh boy! No Paul Blackburn. Paul Blackburn will start the year on the IL. So that was the other question as to whether or not Blackburn would be available. But knee inflammation takes him out, that leaves them without another potential starting pitcher to help. So it will be Tyler McGill pitching Game 2. The Mets are saying all the right things about McGill, and to his credit, McGill looked pretty good last year and was, in terms of multiple roles that he played, both at the bullpen and starting and making spot starts. McGill was overall pretty decent for them, particularly in the second half of the season. But it's another guy who's just been on the cusp of like that fifth spot, sixth spot, spot starter, a long relief guy. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how he responds, and then what people were probably most fascinated by. They will go with Griffin Canning in Game 3. And Griffin Canning, a major reclamation project. These guys like Luis Severino, he didn't have as bad a year as Luis Severino in 2023, but not good. The career numbers not great with Canning, but they obviously see major value with Canning and what he can do for this team. I'm intensely excited to see what happens with him, because if the Mets can find some value in this guy, he does have really good off-speed stuff, and that's what they had focused on. And that's been sort of the thing the last couple of years with Major League Baseball, and them finding value in the guys who are not throwing 100 miles an hour, because those guys' arms just fall off eventually, and they're never really able to regain their abilities. For every Paul Skeens, and there is also a Matt Harvey, a guy who can just kind of lose it, and Tommy John can just destroy him. And the Mets and other major league teams, they've started to kind of like focus on the guys who throw off-speed stuff, but don't have the fastball to accompany it. And Canning's fastball got wrecked last year. The numbers were not good. It's a pretty straight pitch, and he does not throw it very hard. So he was getting absolutely demolished. I put a lot of the blame on the Angels, honestly, because I think that organization is just an absolute train wreck. Not dissimilar to the Mets pre-Steve Cohen. So that's where they are. But Canning, if the Mets can Severino him, I don't know if that's the correct the verbiage here. If they can reclaim him and find value in Griffin Canning, I mean, it would be pretty amazing if they could reinvigorate Griffin Canning into a legitimate starting pitcher again in Major League Baseball, because it looked like his career was on life support, and the Mets are making a pretty big prediction that they think Canning has abilities. It's worth saying that they probably were not expecting to go with Canning this early in the year. It was probably, people were expecting it was going to be more of like, oh, well, he might be fighting for the fifth spot. He's going to be probably competing with Blackburn or McGill. They did not expect him pitching the third game of the season in Houston. But that's just where we are. That's just how the dice has been rolled in the case of the Mets. So there's a lot of starting pitching questions. We probably have even more than before we started spring training. Maybe the biggest question is what's going to happen with Kodai Senga, because there is still no real clear indication as to what Senga is going to be like in 2025. In the brief bits that we saw Senga, which was so exceedingly brief that his Baseball Reference page for 2024 it's almost nothing. So it was one regular season start, and then of course those playoff starts, which were not good. And so we haven't really seen like ace caliber Kodai Senga in quite some time, since the end of 2023. So I'm interested to see if he can bring it back, if he can be that guy who can be the helpful, useful starting pitcher who has the great stuff, the gross forkball, all that. I'm all for it. But there are questions. There are also questions in the bullpen, where they brought in Brazoban, who didn't pitch well when the Mets acquired him, and had to be called and had to be sent down eventually, because he was just pitching pretty badly. He makes the team. I think they're more inclined to go with Nunez once Nunez is healthy. So there might be that situation where they may not, Brosman may not be around for very long unless he's producing. So he makes the team for now, but he's got to make it happen for himself here. AJ Minter, I'm intensely interested to see how he responds. Obviously a terrific left-handed pitcher, but had the surgery of the hip last year, ended his season prematurely, and then signed with the Mets in the offseason. A signing I really liked, but bringing him into here, there are questions about his health. It wasn't totally clear if he was going to be able to join the team because problems with the hip still. But thankfully, the Mets were able to bring him in. And then finally, Edwin Diaz. And then Diaz he's been an interesting case where the stats have been fine, not great, but whatever in spring training. The velocity way down is the concerning part, because for Diaz, it's never been really a problem of like his stuff. He had the 100-mile-an-hour fastball and the great slider, but his command would sometimes fail him. It failed him more often than not in 2024. He didn't look like 2022 Diaz, who had that just elite control and that slider working really well and that fastball, of course, popping. And you take Diaz and you take the fastball away from him, he looks like a pitcher that doesn't really have quite the same impact. And considering how much the Mets are paying for him, it's even more concerning, really, in that case. I would look at it as something to monitor and see if there's potentially a problem with Diaz. If there's an arm issue, then it does end up being where Minter has to close. This is where acquiring Minter was very important for them. They needed that dependable eighth inning guy who could close in a pinch if they really needed to. So. On paper, it all looks pretty decent with the Mets bullpen, but there are certainly questions. Can Jose Budo do the same thing they did last year? Is Max Kranick legit? Let's see how that goes. All those issues. But there's definitely value there. I don't really mind their bullpen. It looks like a pretty decent unit altogether. That could potentially be a really good unit, but I have a lot of questions about that entire pitching staff, that it's really dependent on a lot of things breaking right for them. And things broke right for the Mets for the most part in 2024 of that rotation. And we were saying a lot of the same things in spring training in the offseason about that 2024 team not looking like a full unit, and they surprised us in a major way. So if they can surprise us again, I'd be really happy about it. The one thing I'm not really concerned about is the offense, which is that with Vientos, with Alonso, with Lindor, and with Soto, they have an incredible unit, much better than, and I'm going to wade back into these waters, unfortunately, but it's got to be said. It has to be said. Our crosstown rivals, the New York Yankees, have such an inferior looking lineup that it's actually pretty pathetic. It's maybe pathetic's a little too harsh, but I look at that team as just, I don't know what they were doing in the offseason, and people will say Bellinger and Goldschmidt look really good in the spring training. I have absolutely zero confidence in those guys looking like legitimate players. So they surrounded Aaron Judge with absolutely nothing. And eventually it's got to swing the other way with Aaron Judge, right? Like at some point, somebody like regular season teams are just like, oh, well, we'll just pitch him like, Cleveland did that entire ALCS where he looked like an absolute, he looked like Dave Kingman, only worse. The Yankees were saved pretty much by Juan Soto and Giancarlo Stanton. That entire postseason, those two guys were basically carrying the team. And you look at that team right now, that is no Stanton, no Garrett Cole, but I'm talking about the lineup right now, but no Garrett Cole also. They've surrounded him with old man Paul Goldschmidt, Cody Bellinger, who is kind of a Mr. Jekyll, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation. Jazz Chisholm, who can't stay healthy. And, you tell me. Is Jason Dominguez? Is Jason Dominguez legit? I don't know. Is Austin Wells able to take this into the next level? That lineup just looks like a complete, a completely different team without Juan Soto. And probably if the Mets didn't have Juan Soto, it would be like a pretty similar unit. There is no doubt that Aaron Judge is a much better player than Juan Soto. Soto doesn't have anywhere near the health issues that Judge has had, and he's a lot younger than Judge. But also, Judge does not have a co-lead here anymore. He doesn't have Juan Soto to kind of lean on in these cases, and undoubtedly, Francisco Lindor way more talented than anybody else on the Yankees roster, from an offensive point of view, and honestly from a defensive point of view. Also, I would put Lindor up against anybody that's on that team. So he has a much better co-star, Juan Soto does, and Francisco Lindor than anybody that Aaron Judge does. Does Aaron Judge have anybody at this point? Who's the next highest WAR on that team? Is it Chisholm? Is Chisholm is Chisholm the number 2? Is it Bellinger? It's not Goldschmidt, I guarantee you. But, find me who else is on that team who is anywhere near as talented. Find me 2 people who are anywhere near as talented as Lindor. And then you factor in also Vientos and Pete Alonso. And Pete Alonso, I think, is going to be out for revenge. This is going to be a year where, obviously, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him again, and he has to produce. But I think he's also, after an off season of just nobody really looking at him and saying, I need to acquire that guy. Oh, I'm really interested. And there were teams that had payroll. They had money to spend, and nobody was really looking to acquire Alonso on anywhere near his terms, either from a annual value or from a year's perspective. So Alonso is going to be out for revenge. He's going to be looking to reinvigorate himself to look like the player that he was of old, and encouraging signs where he's been trying. Looks like he's been trying to hit the other way. We saw that in his home run on Monday against the Yankees. That will look very similar to the home run against the Brewers in a wild card series that gave the Mets that tied that game up, or gave the Mets the lead, I should say. But it's that 1 through 4 is just absolutely terrific. And then factor in Brandon Nimmo, who was a borderline all-star in the first half of the season, had his injuries, had his own problems with the knee, but looked really good in spring training. So you put that into it, and then also factor in whenever Alvarez is back, whenever McNeil is back, whatever Brett Beatty can give them, Jose Siri. It's a significantly better lineup than anything the Yankees can throw. And if you're thinking that this is going to be like another Judge season, I would throw caution on it. Judge played an amazing ton of games for them last year, and looked really worn out by the end of the year. And it's got, again, it has to swing the other way eventually with Judge. He can't stay this good for this long without there being some kind of counter effect and teams eventually getting wise to his act. So my thing has always been the Judge is just a better version of Ryan Howard, and that he'll eventually either the body breaks down or eventually teams get wiser about how to pitch to him. But remains to be seen how long they have to wait. So I will concede that probably the Yankees have a better starting pitching rotation, even without Garrett Cole. That Yankees rotation probably way better than the Mets. Bullpen probably better. I would say undoubtedly the Mets have a far superior lineup. So take that. But if I'm going to echo Juan Soto and say that is this a New York town? Is New York a Mets town? You know what? I will say probably there's. I think what he was trying to say was that there were a lot of Met fans and that they could easily take over the town if the Mets start to win. But it's on the Mets. The Mets have to win. The Mets have to win these games. It's not just winning Subway Series and taking surprising everybody in the wild card and the NLDS. You gotta take that next step in the NLCS. You gotta knock out the Dodgers. You gotta knock out the Padres. You gotta knock off the Braves. You gotta knock off the Phillies. It's going to be interesting. I really like this group. I think Juan Soto will obviously really change things for them. They've never had a guy like Soto, and I've said this before. there has never been a player anywhere near as talented as Soto, and I say that as a massive David Wright fan, a guy who has a ton of respect for guys like Mike Piazza and Darryl Strawberry and Carlos Beltran and of course Francisco Lindor, but they have never had a guy with this many tools, not defensive or with his base running. We've already seen some adventures with Soto, but as an offensive player, I can't recall anybody being anywhere near as good as him. He is just in the brief time we've seen him in spring training, just been unbelievable. It's been an amazing situation. I think we're headed for a huge year with Soto. Obviously, people are projecting him as a major MVP candidate and a guy who may be able to knock off Ohtani if there's any kind of health issues with Ohtani or there's just voter fatigue. I'll go as far as to say that Soto has got runner-up for MVP voting locked up, and I'll put my stamp on that. I will say that Juan Soto should be the runner-up for MVP this year. Remains to be seen what will happen with Ohtani, but for the Mets as a overall unit, it's tough. You're banking on the Braves being as bad as they were last year, and let's be clear, the Braves were. I almost cursed. The Braves were bad last year. That was a bad team that they put together. Even with the successes that they had with Fried and of course Chris Sale and Spencer Schwallenbach, whose name I hate saying. Spencer Strider coming. They didn't have Strider last year, and Strider, Sale, Schwellenbach. It's a pretty impressive crew that they have in that starting rotation. It's just a matter of their lineup performs better, and there's Acuna is going to be kind of a question mark for them for a while, but they still have Ozzy Albies, they still have Michael Harris Jr. That's a really good group. Marcell Ozuna, Austin Riley, Matt Olson. It's as much as I love the Mets lineup, it's a lineup that 1 through 9 is probably just as effective, if not more so, than the Mets lineup. Phillies, it's kind of like win now or bust, so they're going to be really desperate because they have so many veterans on their team with Trey Turner and Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber. That starting rotation has a lot of guys on there also that are signed up major deals, long-term deals. They're also in their 30s or entering their 30s, and they have to make things happen for themselves. It's going to be a three-way race, in my opinion, but I do think the Mets ultimately take second place this year in the NL East. Last year I left it to my cat. I don't know if people have seen that short that I posted last year. I wasn't going to let Selena try her luck again because ultimately she was wrong. But I will put the NL East standings as of today. My projected standings are going to be Braves 1, Mets 2, Phillies 3. And then after that, Nationals 4, just because they can't be as bad as was coming with Miami Marlins, who might be fielding the worst team in franchise history, which is really saying something because the Marlins have had some horrendous teams in the past. This might be the worst team that they've ever fielded, ever. A team that might even challenge the 62 Mets as the worst team in National League history, and may even challenge the 2024 White Sox as the worst team ever. It is a horrific group. That is a easy last place. I'll put a lot of money on a lot of things, but I'll put on Marlins finishing last in the National League. Absolutely, 1,000%. That is a bad team. And if the Mets don't win, the majority of their matchups against the Marlins, something went terribly wrong this season because that is a bad unit. So that's my NL East standings. For as how far the team can go, I'll put them back in the NLCS this year. I genuinely believe that they have the ability to get there, and that starting rotation with all their question marks, and the bullpen with all their question marks, ultimately they still have a terrific lineup. We saw last year that even a rotation, even a bullpen that has certainly more questions than answers, I still look at it as we got last year with probably less. I would say like there was probably less pitching depth last year than there is this year. Factoring in a healthy Kodai Senga is a big part of it. So we'll see how that plays out, and I'm intensely interested. I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm furious that I have to work tomorrow, and I'm going to miss the start of the game. But I'm going to try and factor my break in so that I can see at least the first inning for the Mets, so I can see that at least and try to get that on my either my phone or on TV at work. So I plan on watching that. I want to see the Mets tomorrow. 4:00 Eastern is the start time. 4:10 Eastern is the start time. We are finally here. I can't wait. It's something where I always get really excited for opening day. Last year they lost. This year I'm going to put my prediction in. The Mets are going to win opening day tomorrow against the Houston Astros. And we may even see some home run fireworks from the Mets from some combination. I'm going to put Vientos as the likely home run hitter tomorrow. I'm not going to put money on this, but that's at least my prediction for tomorrow is we're going to see some fireworks. We're going to see a Vientos home run. So put that down for yourselves. Again, we're finally here. I'm so thrilled. I'm so excited. We're finally starting 2025, and it's I think going to be a really great year, and at the very least a very entertaining year, and one that I plan on going to see as many games as I can in 2025. So can't wait. It's so exciting, and God, is there anything else to say? I don't know. Let's go Mets. Take care, everybody. Let's go. Root for the Mets tomorrow. Let's go.
Orange and blue running through our veins, rooting for the Mets to win to end the pains. It's a Mets podcast, hosted by Michael Bayside. His views and ideas are fortified. Mets news, saves, injuries, and wins. We can't wait for the next game to begin. This is the theme song to the Mike's Mets podcast. This is the theme song to the Mike's Mets podcast.
Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets Podcast. If you haven't already, please follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave a like and a comment. It helps so much. Finally, please follow our Twitter and Blue Sky pages. You can find us at Twitter at Mike's Mets Pod, all one word, and on Blue Sky at Mike's Mets Podcast.bsky.social. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day or evening, and let's go Mets.